The training center floated in space above a peaceful planet called Verath Prime. Ships from many worlds came here, bringing students who wanted to learn about dangerous animals from across the galaxy. The building was huge, with glass walls and metal corridors that gleamed under the station lights. Claire Martinez stood in the observation room with 22 other students. She was the only human in the group, and she could feel the others keeping their distance from her. At 22 years old, she was shorter than most of them, and much smaller than the tall aliens around her. Her dark hair was tied back, and her brown eyes watched everything with quiet attention. The instructor was named Krelva. He was a Verath, tall and strange-looking with 4 arms and eyes that could look in many directions at once. He stood at the front of the room, his voice loud and clear. "Today, you will see real predators for the first time," Krelva said. "Inside that box are 6 Dracor cubs. They are only 4 weeks old, but do not let that fool you. On their home planet, adult Dracors are the strongest hunters. They have no enemies. Their claws can cut through metal." Claire leaned forward, her interest growing. She had read about Dracors the night before, studying everything she could find. They lived in thick forests on a planet with heavy gravity. They hunted in family groups and took care of their young for many months. A student raised a wing. His name was Piptar, and he looked nervous. "When do they become dangerous?" At 6 weeks old," Krelva answered. "You will work with them 2 weeks before that time. This test will show us if you can stay calm around dangerous animals." Claire had worked with predators before, back on Earth. She had spent 3 years at an animal shelter that took care of wolves, bears, and big cats. She knew that young predators were usually more scared than dangerous. They acted tough to hide their fear. "The cubs will come out in 30 seconds," Krelva said. "Remember what you learned. Stay back, watch them carefully, and do not touch them. You are here to observe only." The other students turned on their energy shields. Blue light hummed around them, creating walls that would keep the cubs away. Claire's hand moved toward her own shield control, but she stopped. She had read that energy barriers scared young Dracors. The bright light and strange buzzing made them panic. The metal door of the containment box slid open. Nothing happened at first. Then 6 small shapes crept out slowly. The Dracor cubs were about the size of large dogs. Their bodies were covered in dark scales that shined like oil on water. Their eyes were big and gold, set forward on their pointed heads. Small spines ran down their backs, and their tails had round clubs at the end. They walked carefully, staying close together. One cub, bigger than the others, led the way. The rest followed right behind, touching each other with their noses as they moved. Claire watched them closely. She saw how they pressed against each other for comfort. She saw how their eyes darted around the room, taking in all the strange sights and smells. She noticed their small bodies shaking slightly. These were not monsters. These were babies, far from home and very afraid. The lead cub suddenly made a sharp hissing sound. Several students jumped back. Energy shields flashed brighter all around the room. The sudden lights and electrical buzzing made the cubs bunch together even tighter. The lead cub pushed in front of its brothers and sisters. Its small spines standing up, Claire made her choice. She turned off her shield and took a slow step forward. "Human Claire, stay where you are," Krelva's voice called out, but she barely heard him. She had seen this before in frightened animals on Earth. The aggressive display was fake. It was not a real threat. The lead cub was trying to protect its family because it was scared. Claire slowly lowered herself to the floor. She made herself small and less frightening. Her movements were smooth and careful. Her breathing was slow and steady. She did not look directly at the lead cub. Instead, she kept her eyes slightly turned away, showing she was not a threat. The room became completely silent. Every student, every teacher, every camera was focused on the human girl sitting quietly on the floor, just a few steps away from 6 supposedly dangerous predator cubs. The lead cub stared at her with suspicion. Its golden eyes were narrow and watchful, but it did not attack. Instead, It tilted its head to one side, trying to understand this strange creature that was not running away or hiding behind barriers like the others. Claire began to hum. The sound was low and rhythmic, coming from deep in her chest. It was something she had learned while working with rescued animals on Earth. The steady vibration seemed to calm frightened creatures. She did not know if it would work on aliens, but it was worth trying. One of the smaller cubs, hiding behind its larger sibling, peeked its head out. Its spines were flat against its back, and its tail was relaxed instead of rigid. Claire stayed perfectly still. She let the cubs make all the choices. She was just a calm presence. Not threatening or scary. Just something new to explore in their frightening new world. The small cub took one careful step toward her. Then another. The lead cub made a quiet chirping sound that might have been a warning. But the curious cub did not listen. It came closer to Claire, its small nose twitching as it smelled her. When it was near enough, it stretched out its neck and carefully sniffed her knee. Claire did not move. She barely breathed. The cub's nose was cool and slightly wet against her skin through her uniform. After a moment of investigation, the cub made a soft, trilling sound. It moved closer and pressed its small, scaly body against her leg. Then something amazing happened. One by one, the other cubs followed. The second cub came over, then a third. The lead cub watched for a long moment. Then it too walked forward and settled down beside Claire. Within minutes, all 6 Dracor cubs had arranged themselves around her. The bigger ones faced outward with their spines raised, while the smaller ones pressed close to her body. They had formed a protective circle, but they were not protecting themselves. They were protecting her. The observation room stayed silent. No one moved. No one spoke. They just watched as a human girl sat, surrounded by alien predators who should have been dangerous, who should have been aggressive, but who instead treated her like family. Claire felt their warmth against her. She heard their breathing, soft and steady now instead of quick and frightened. She felt their small bodies relaxing as they realized they were safe. This was why she had come here. Not for grades or certificates, but for this moment when fear turned into trust, when different beings found common ground despite everything that should have kept them apart. In the observation deck above, Krelva stood frozen, all 4 of his arms hanging loose in shock. In 30 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. The other students whispered to each other in their various languages, their translators buzzing softly. Some looked amazed. Others looked afraid. All of them were trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Claire sat with the cubs for 3 hours. They would not let anyone else approach. When Krelva tried to come closer, the lead cub hissed so fiercely that the experienced instructor backed away immediately. Finally, Claire stood up slowly. The cubs stood with her, staying close. She walked toward the containment unit, and they followed her like she was their mother. She led them inside, waited until they were settled, and then stepped back out. Only then did the door close. She turned to face Krelva and the other instructors who had gathered. Their faces showed confusion, wonder, and something else. Something that looked like fear. "How did you do that?" Krelva asked quietly. Claire thought about her answer. "I just showed them they were safe," she said. "They were scared, so I helped them feel better." But everyone in that room knew it was more than that. What they had witnessed was something the galaxy had never seen before. A human, a predator from a death world, had connected with alien predators in a way that should have been impossible. And this was only the beginning. The medical wing of the training center was full of confused scientists. They stood around screens and data displays, watching recordings of what had happened in the arena over and over again. Dr. Venrick, the head scientist, kept shaking his head in disbelief. "This makes no sense," he said to the others. "Dracor cubs at that age should be aggressive. They should attack anything unfamiliar. But look at this." Well. On the screen, Claire sat on the floor, while 6 predator cubs arranged themselves around her in a protective formation. When Krelva tried to approach, the cubs had defended her like she was one of their own. Look at how they positioned themselves, Dr. Venrick continued, pointing at the screen. This is exactly how adult Drakors protect their young. But they turned it around. They are protecting her. Claire waited in a small room nearby. She could hear bits of the conversation through the door. She smiled a little. What she had done was not magic or anything special. She had just understood what the cubs needed and given it to them. The door opened and Krelva walked in. His forearms were crossed in a way that Claire had learned meant he was thinking hard about something. "Student Claire Martinez," he said formally. "I do not know what to do about you. You broke many rules today. You turned off your safety shield. You approached dangerous animals. You touched them when I told everyone not to." Claire nodded. "I understand. I accept whatever punishment you think is right. But," Krelva continued, his many eyes focusing on her, "what you did worked better than anything we have ever seen. You made those cubs trust you in 10 minutes. That usually takes us weeks or months. How did you do it?" "Doc, I worked with predators on Earth," Claire explained. "I learned that young predators are usually scared, not mean. Fear makes them act aggressive. I made myself safe and predictable. I let them come to me instead of forcing anything. Many people know these ideas," Krelva said. "But few can actually do what you did. You had no fear. How did you stay so calm?" Claire thought about it. "I was not afraid because they were just babies. They were far from home and scared. I have been in that situation many times. Different places, always being new, always trying to fit in. I understood how they felt." Krelva's antennae moved in surprise. "You felt emotions with them?" Quote. When quote. Ram. From. Yes. Interesting. Krelva was quiet for a moment. "Come with me. The council wants to talk to you." Claire followed him through the station's hallways. Other students and teachers moved aside as they passed. They stared at her with mixed expressions. Some looked amazed. Others looked scared. Word about what happened had spread fast. They entered a large conference room. Dr. Venrick was there with other scientists. When Claire walked in, Dr. Venrick turned to her. "Ah, the human," he said. His translator turned his clicking sounds into words. "Maybe you can explain what our machines cannot. We checked your body during the test. Your heart beat slower when the cubs came near. Your stress chemicals stayed normal. Everything shows you were completely calm in a situation that should have made you very afraid." "I told Instructor Krelva," Claire said. "I was not afraid of them. But why not?" Dr. Venrick pulled up charts showing data from other students. "These are the body readings from the other students at the same time. Fast heartbeats, stress chemicals, quick breathing. This is normal. This is what happens when prey species meet predators. You are from a dangerous planet. You are also a predator by nature. But your response is different from anything we have recorded. Humans are social predators," Claire explained. "We evolved to hunt in groups and to work with other species. We turned wolves into dogs. We partnered with horses. We even trained birds to hunt with us. We naturally look for ways to connect with animals, not just see them as threats or food. But drakers are not domestic animals," another scientist said. "They are wild and dangerous. They have never worked with other species before. Neither had wolves before humans came along," Claire replied. "The ability to bond across species is not about whether the animal has done it before. It is about reading their behavior, understanding what they need, and building trust." Dr. Venrick's antennae pointed forward. "Show me." "What?" "Prove your method works. We have another group of cubs coming next week. They are from Corvin 4, a species known for being very aggressive. Show us how you would approach them." Krelva raised one of his arms. "Doctor, that might be too soon. Student Claire has only been here 3 months. And yet she did in minutes what our methods take weeks to achieve, Dr. Venrick said. I think we have been teaching animal handling wrong. We have been trying to control and contain. Maybe the human way of empathy and connection works better. Claire felt nervous, but also excited. I will try, but I need to be honest. What I did today was not following rules or steps. It was instinct based on experience. I cannot promise it will work every time with every species. Nothing works every time, Dr. Venrick said. But your instincts were better than our careful plans. That alone is worth studying. Over the next days, Claire became the subject of intense study. She went to her regular classes but also sat through many observation sessions where teams of scientists watched her interact with different animals. They measured her body signals, studied her movements, even tried to measure the subtle ways she changed her voice and breathing around nervous animals. The Dracor cubs became a special focus. They were moved to a bigger space, and Claire was made their main handler. This shocked her classmates. She visited the cubs 3 times every day, bringing food and toys, and just spending time with them. The cubs had different personalities. The leader, she privately called Scout. He was brave and curious, but also very protective of his siblings. The smallest cub stayed close to Claire. She thought of him as Shadow. There were twins who played together constantly. She called them Storm and Rain. Another cub was bigger and more careful. She named him Guardian in her mind. The last cub loved food most. She thought of him as Hunter. By the end of the week, the cubs would run to the door when Claire came. Their small tails wagged with excitement. When she entered their space, they would gather around her immediately, making chirping and trilling sounds, all trying to get her attention. During one of these visits, a man named Commander Jake Hayes arrived at the facility. Commander Hayes was a human military officer who worked with the Galactic Council's security forces. At 45 years old, he had spent his whole adult life in the military and had fought in many battles. He was concerned about how other species saw humans. I will be direct, Miss Martinez, he said, watching through the window as Claire played with the cubs below. What you did has gotten a lot of attention, and not all of it is good. I know some species find human behavior strange, Claire said carefully, keeping her focus on the cubs. Shadow was trying to climb into her lap, while Scout checked her equipment bag. It is more than that. Some people are starting to think humans have an almost magical ability to control other species. Some council members worry that we might be a threat. Not because of weapons, but because we could use dangerous animals from other worlds. Claire looked at him sharply. That is ridiculous. I am not controlling anything. I am just being kind to scared animals. I know that. You know that. But think about how it looks to species that evolved as prey animals. They see a predator from a dangerous world walking safely among creatures that would kill them, and those creatures acting loyal and affectionate. It triggers their deepest fears. So what should I do? Stop treating animals with kindness? No, Commander Hayes said firmly. Absolutely not. But you need to understand what your work here means. Humanity is still new to the galactic community. We are building our reputation. What you are doing could either help us fit in or create divisions that will take generations to fix. Claire looked back at the cubs. Guardian had joined Shadow in trying to sit in her lap, while the twins fought over a new toy she had brought. I cannot control how other species see me, she said quietly. I can only control what I do. And I will not pretend to be something I am not, or treat these animals badly, just to make others comfortable. Commander Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled warmly. Good. That is exactly what I hoped you would say. The galaxy does not need humans to be less human. It needs to learn what being human really means. Dr. Venrick had been working hard to fight against the negative stories about humans with scientific data and careful analysis of Claire's work. He came to her quarters late one evening, looking tired but determined. I have prepared a presentation for the council, he said. A complete analysis of your interactions with both the Dracors and the Ridge Stalkers we will test you with. The data clearly shows that your success was not manipulation or control. It was genuine empathy and understanding. Will it be enough? Claire asked. I do not know. Fear is powerful, and facts alone do not overcome it. Trust is needed too. That night, Claire made a decision. She asked for an emergency meeting with the Xenobiology Council. She would speak, not as a student, but as a representative of humanity. Commander Hayes tried to talk her out of it, warning that she was putting herself at risk, but she would not change her mind. 3 weeks after the first test, the Xenobiology Council held a special gathering. Representatives from 47 different species traveled to the training facility. Some called it the greatest breakthrough in animal handling history. Others called it a dangerous display of human manipulation. The demonstration arena was much bigger now. Observation platforms surrounded the space, filled with diplomats, scientists, military officials, and reporters from across the galaxy. The tension in the air was thick. Claire stood in a small room next to the arena, trying to calm her racing heart. She had never liked being the center of attention. Now she had to represent not just herself, but all of humanity. The weight of it felt crushing. You do not have to do this, Commander Hayes said quietly. He had stayed at the facility since arriving. If the pressure is too much, we can stop this. No, Claire said, though her voice shook a little. If this can help humans and other species understand each other better, it is worth the discomfort. Dr. Venrick entered the room. His antennae vibrated with excitement. The Dracor cubs are being moved into position. Student Claire, I must tell you something. We made one change to the demonstration, because the council requested it. What kind of change? They want to see you work with an unfamiliar species. The cubs you bonded with know you too well now. They want to see your methods with predators that have never met a human before. Claire felt her stomach drop. What species? Corvin Ridge stalkers. Adolescent, about 3 months old. They are much larger than the Dracors, and have a reputation for extreme aggression. Doctor, that is not a fair test, Commander Hayes said. Ridge stalkers are very difficult, even for experienced handlers. I agree, but the council insisted. They want to remove any possibility that student Claire's success was because of long exposure, rather than real ability. Claire took a deep breath. Okay, what do I need to know about Ridge stalkers? Dr. Venrick showed her a holographic display. They are pack hunters from Corvin 4, a high-gravity world with extreme temperatures. Adults can reach 5 meters in length and use coordinated attack strategies. These juveniles are about 1/3 adult size. They have very good senses, especially smell, and they are highly intelligent. What is their social structure? Hierarchical, with strict dominance patterns. Physical dominance displays are common even among juveniles. Have they been around other species before? Only Corvin handlers, and those interactions were minimal. They have been kept isolated to preserve their natural behavior for study. Claire nodded slowly. Isolated juveniles would be even more stressed than the Dracor cubs had been. They would be on high alert, quick to see threats, and possibly aggressive from confusion and fear. How many? 4. Okay, Claire said, straightening her shoulders. Let us do this. Walking into the arena felt unreal. The moment she stepped through the entrance, all the noise from the observation platforms stopped. Hundreds of beings fell silent, watching her every move. The arena floor had been changed to look like a Corvin environment, with rocky outcrops and temperature controls creating warm and cool zones. In the center sat a sealed containment unit. Instructor Krelva's voice boomed through the space. Today's demonstration will proceed as follows. 4 Corvan Ridge stalker juveniles will be released into the arena. Student Claire Martinez, representing the human species, will attempt to interact with them peacefully. No weapons, no drugs, no protective barriers. This demonstration will continue until either a peaceful interaction is established or safety protocols determine the risk has become too great. Claire walked to the center of the arena. Her movements were calm and deliberate, despite the adrenaline rushing through her body. She was very aware of the thousands of eyes watching her, the cameras recording everything, the weight of expectation and judgment, but she pushed all of that aside. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was what was about to come out of that box. Beginning release sequence, Krelva announced. The door of the containment unit slid open. For several heartbeats, nothing came out. Then Claire saw movement in the shadows, the gleam of eyes reflecting the arena lights. The first ridge stalker stepped out carefully. It was much larger than the Dracor cubs, nearly the size of an earth lion. Its body was covered in thick, shaggy fur, ranging from dark gray to almost black, with lighter patches around its eyes and mouth. Its legs were powerfully built, ending in massive paws with claws that could be pulled in and out. Its head was broad and bear-like, with forward-facing eyes that gleamed with intelligence. 3 more followed, slightly smaller but no less imposing. They moved with the confident grace of apex predators. Their attention immediately fixed on Claire. She remained absolutely still, barely breathing. Every instinct she had developed over years of working with predators told her to be careful, to respect the danger these animals represented. The largest ridge stalker, clearly the dominant juvenile, took several steps forward. Its lips pulled back slightly, showing impressive teeth. A low rumbling sound came from its chest, not quite a growl, but definitely a warning. Claire slowly lowered herself to the ground, making herself smaller. She kept her posture relaxed and non-threatening. She did not make direct eye contact, instead keeping her gaze soft and slightly turned away. The ridge stalker came closer, its massive head lowering as it smelled her. She could feel its breath on her face, hot, and carrying the distinctive scent of a meat-eater. In the observation platforms, beings were holding their breath, waiting to see if she would be attacked. But Claire had noticed something. The ridge stalker's pupils were large, and its ears kept moving, tracking sounds from all around the arena. Its tail was low and slightly tucked. These were not the signs of an aggressive predator preparing to attack. This was an animal that was scared. She began to hum, the same low, rhythmic sound she had used with the Dracor cubs. The vibration in her chest seemed to catch the ridge stalker's attention. Its ears focused forward, and its head tilted slightly in curiosity. One of the smaller juveniles moved closer, encouraged by its leader's investigation. This one was even more nervous, its body language showing uncertainty. It stretched its neck forward, sniffing at Claire's outstretched hand. Claire remained perfectly still as the juvenile investigated her. Its nose was cold and wet, like a dog's. After a moment, it made a soft chuffing sound and moved even closer, pressing its face against her shoulder. The lead juvenile watched this interaction carefully. Then, as if making a decision, it took another step forward and lowered its massive body to the ground beside Claire. It was a gesture of trust, making itself vulnerable by lying down. The other 2 juveniles followed. They approached more confidently now. Within minutes, all 4 ridge stalkers were gathered around Claire, their large bodies pressed against her in a protective formation eerily similar to the one the Dracor cubs had formed. The arena remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a sound began to spread through the observation platforms. It started with one being, then spread to others. It took Claire a moment to recognize it as applause, though it sounded different across species. Clapping hands, clicking mandibles, thumping feet, even melodic whistles. Dr. Venrick's voice came through the speakers. Even through the translator, Claire could hear the wonder in it. Unprecedented. Absolutely unprecedented. Claire sat surrounded by 4 massive predators from an alien world, feeling their warmth, hearing their breathing. She smiled. This was why she had come to the training facility. Not for recognition or fame, but for this moment when fear gave way to trust, when difference gave way to connection. Commander Hayes watched from the observation platform, standing beside a group of council representatives. One of them, a tall being from a peaceful herbivore species, turned to him with wide eyes. "Your species the being said softly. You walk among predators, as if they are family. Not family, Hayes replied. But not enemies either. Just fellow travelers trying to find their way in a confusing universe. Claire sees that in them, and somehow, they see it in her too. The demonstration was supposed to last 30 minutes. It lasted 3 hours. The Ridge stalkers refused to leave Claire's side. When handlers tried to approach with food, the juveniles growled warnings. Only when Claire herself walked them back to their containment unit did they agree to go. As she left the arena, Claire was immediately surrounded by reporters and scientists, all shouting questions. Commander Hayes and several security officers had to form a barrier around her to get her through the crowd. Later, in the quiet of her quarters, Claire finally let herself relax. Her hands were shaking from the adrenaline crash. She had done it. She had proven that her methods worked, that connection across species was possible, but she also knew this was just the beginning. The real work would be teaching others, building a new understanding of how different beings could interact. That would take years, maybe generations. A message came through on her communication device. It was from Dr. Venrick. The council wanted to meet with her first thing in the morning. They had a decision to make about the future of xenobiology training. Claire looked out her window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Drakor cubs were sleeping in their habitat. The Ridge stalkers were settling into their new environment. And across the galaxy, people were watching recordings of today's demonstration, forming opinions about what it meant. She thought about Scout and Shadow, Storm and Rain, Guardian and Hunter. She thought about the 4 Ridge stalkers who had trusted her despite every reason not to. They had taught her something important. Trust was not about similarity or familiarity. It was about recognizing the common ground beneath all the differences. Every creature, no matter how alien, understood fear and safety, threat and comfort. And sometimes, all it took was one person willing to sit down, be patient, and offer kindness to bridge the gap between species. The success of the demonstration should have been a triumph. Instead, it started a firestorm of controversy that spread throughout the galactic community with frightening speed. Claire was in her quarters, studying for her upcoming exams, when Commander Hayes arrived with bad news. His face was grim. There has been an attack, he said bluntly. 3 Earth Embassy staff members on Talorn 4 were assaulted by a mob. They are alive, but one is in critical condition. Claire felt her blood turn cold. What? Why? The mob was shouting about humans being predator controllers and species manipulators. There is a growing movement across several worlds calling for restrictions on human travel and interaction with animals from other planets. That is insane. I was just trying to help some scared animals. I know, but fear rarely listens to logic. Hayes pulled up a holographic display showing news feeds from across the galaxy. Look at how your demonstration is being shown. Claire watched in horror as she saw edited footage of herself with the Ridge stalkers, but with dark narration suggesting she was demonstrating humanity's ability to weaponize alien predators. Another feed showed her surrounded by the Drakor cubs, with commentary warning about Earth's potential to use their unnatural animal handling abilities to infiltrate other worlds. They are making it look like I am some kind of threat, she whispered. Not just you. All of humanity. There are calls in the Council to restrict human involvement in xenobiology programs, to limit our access to alien animals, even to establish monitoring protocols for human behavior around non-human creatures. Dr. Venrick arrived moments later, his antennae drooping with obvious distress. Student Claire, you need to see something. We have been analyzing data from the observation systems during your demonstrations, and we discovered something disturbing. He pulled up technical readouts. These are electromagnetic readings from the arena. During both of your demonstrations, there were unusual interference patterns that we initially thought were equipment malfunctions. What kind of interference? Subliminal frequency broadcasts, designed to heighten anxiety and fear responses in certain species. Someone was deliberately trying to make your demonstrations appear more threatening to the observers. Commander Hayes leaned forward, his military instincts engaged. Are you saying someone sabotaged the demonstrations? I am saying someone tried to, Venric corrected. The broadcasts were calibrated to affect species with specific hearing ranges, primarily those from prey background civilizations. They would have made the observers feel more threatened, more frightened, more likely to see student Claire's actions as dangerous. But I succeeded anyway, Claire said slowly. Which means whoever did this did not expect that. They thought making the observers more afraid would be enough to turn opinion against me. Against humanity, Hayes corrected. This is not about you personally, Claire. This is about preventing humans from gaining acceptance in the galactic community. Over the next few days, the conspiracy became clearer. An investigation led by Council security forces uncovered a network of extremists from multiple species, united by a shared fear of human integration into galactic society. They had been working to damage human reputation through propaganda, staged incidents, and manipulation of public perception. The leader, when finally caught, was a high-ranking official from the Talorn Diplomatic Corps named Velkron. During his interrogation, which Claire was allowed to watch via secure video feed, he showed no regret. You do not understand what you are, he told the investigators. His translator made his clicking speech sound cold and precise. Humans are apex predators from a nightmare world. You evolved to kill, to dominate, to conquer. Your natural allies are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. If you are allowed to establish yourselves, to spread your influence, you will attract every predator species to your side. You will build an empire of fangs and claws, and the rest of us will be prey. That is not who we are, Commander Hayes said, though Velkron could not hear him through the one-way feed. Is it not? Claire asked softly. She had been thinking about this constantly since the attack on the embassy staff. Be honest with me, Commander. Humanity's history on Earth is not exactly peaceful. We have been conquerors. We have dominated other species. Maybe he is not entirely wrong to fear us. Hayes was silent for a long moment. You are right that humanity has a dark history. Every species capable of violence has used it at some point. But that is not all we are. For every war we have fought, we have also built bridges. For every species we hunted to extinction, we saved dozens more through conservation efforts. We are capable of terrible things, but we are also capable of incredible compassion. How do we make them see that? I think you already have, Hayes said, pointing to the feed where Velkron continued his bitter speech. Despite his efforts, despite the propaganda and the interference and the manipulation, you succeeded in building peaceful connections with alien predators. You demonstrated exactly the kind of compassion and understanding that he claims humans are incapable of. Dr. Venric had been working without rest to fight the anti-human propaganda with scientific data and careful analysis of Claire's demonstrations. He appeared in her quarters late one evening, looking exhausted but determined. I have prepared a presentation for the Council, he said. A comprehensive analysis of your interactions with both the Dracors and the Ridge Stalkers. The data clearly shows that your success was not due to manipulation or control, but to genuine empathy and understanding. Will it be enough? Claire asked. I do not know. Fear is a powerful force, and overcoming it requires more than data. It requires trust. That night, Claire made a decision. She requested an emergency session with the Xenobiology Council, not as a student, but as a representative of humanity. Commander Hayes tried to talk her out of it, warning that she was putting herself in a vulnerable position, but she would not change her mind. The council chamber was smaller than the demonstration arena but no less frightening. Representatives from dozens of species sat in tiered seating, their attention focused on Claire standing alone in the center. Honored council members, she began. Her voice was steadier than she felt. I am not a diplomat or a politician. I am just a student who loves animals. When I worked with the Dracor cubs and the Ridge Stalkers, I was not trying to show human superiority or prove anything about my species. I was just trying to help some scared, confused babies, feel safe. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I understand that some of you are afraid of humans. Our history gives you reasons to be careful. We come from a dangerous world, and we have done dangerous things, but we have also learned from our mistakes. We have learned that strength without compassion is just cruelty. We have learned that the capacity for violence is meaningless compared to the choice to be kind. Beautiful words, one of the council members said, a snake-like being whose species she did not recognize. But words are easy. How can we trust that humanity will not eventually become what Velkron fears? Arda. We have potential. We have not Arda. You cannot, Claire admitted. Not with absolute certainty. But I can tell you this. When I sat with those ridge stalker juveniles, when they were pressed against me and I could feel their hearts beating, I was not thinking about how I could use them or control them. I was thinking about how vulnerable they were, how much they needed someone to care for them. That instinct, that desire to protect and nurture, is just as much a part of being human as our capacity for violence. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of as many council members as she could. Judge humanity by our worst moments if you want. But also, judge us by our best. Judge us by the wildlife preserves we have established, the endangered species we have saved, the sanctuaries we have built. Judge us by people who dedicate their lives to healing, to teaching, to caring for those who cannot care for themselves. Judge us, she concluded softly, by the choice we make every day to be better than our worst impulses. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, one of the council members, an elderly being from a species Claire recognized as having early conflicts with humans, spoke up. I remember when humans first came to our worlds, he said. His voice carried the weight of years. I remember the fear, the conflict, the misunderstanding, but I also remember a human doctor who stayed behind during an epidemic when all others fled. I remember human engineers who helped us rebuild after natural disasters. I remember human teachers who learned our language so they could educate our children. He looked directly at Claire. You remind me of them, not of the humans who frightened us, but of the ones who gave us hope that peaceful coexistence was possible. Other council members began to speak, sharing their own experiences with humans, both good and bad. The discussion went on for hours. Claire stood in the center, answering questions, clarifying her methods, explaining her philosophy. By the time the session ended, she was exhausted. But she also felt hopeful. Not everyone had been convinced, but the conversation had shifted. Instead of fear and suspicion, there was now curiosity and cautious optimism. 3 days later, the council issued their decision. The council's official response came 3 days later. After long deliberation, they issued a statement that surprised nearly everyone involved. Rather than restricting human involvement in xenobiology programs, they were expanding it. The facility would establish a new department specifically focused on human-developed animal handling techniques, with Claire as the founding student and eventual instructor. Funding would be provided for research into the psychological and biological factors that enabled humans to form cross-species bonds so effectively. More significantly, the Council issued a formal rebuke of the propaganda campaign against humanity and established new protocols for addressing fear-based conspiracy theories. Velkron and his accomplices were charged with multiple crimes, including attempted sabotage and incitement of violence. The news was met with mixed reactions across the galaxy. Some celebrated it as progress toward true cooperation between species. Others remained skeptical, viewing it as dangerous or naive. But at least it was no longer an open question whether humans belonged in the galactic community. Claire stood in the Drakor habitat, watching her cubs play. They were much larger now, nearly adolescent, but they still greeted her with the same enthusiasm they had shown as frightened juveniles. Scout, the lead cub, pressed his head against her side in what had become a familiar gesture of affection. They are going to have to be moved soon, Dr. Venrick said, joining her at the habitat's edge. They are getting too large for this space. and they will need to be with adult Drakors to learn proper social behaviors. I know, Claire said, though the thought of saying goodbye made her chest ache. Where will they go? Goo. 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 There is a sanctuary on Drakor 7 that specializes in rehabilitation of rescued cubs. They will be well cared for. Will I be able to visit them? Once you complete your training and receive your full certification, absolutely. In fact, I suspect they will need handlers who understand their history and their bonds. Claire smiled at that. The idea that she might work with these cubs again, watch them grow into adults, help them thrive, gave purpose to all the difficulty of the past few weeks. Commander Hayes had left the facility the day before, recalled to his regular duties. Before leaving, he had pulled Claire aside for a final conversation. You did something important here, he told her. Not just for humanity, but for the whole concept of how different species can interact. You proved that empathy is not weakness, and that understanding is not the same as control. I just treated some animals with kindness. No, Hayes corrected gently. You demonstrated that kindness can be more powerful than force. That connection is possible even between beings who seem very different. That lesson applies to more than just animal handling. Now, standing in the habitat with her cubs, Claire thought about his words. The galaxy was vast and filled with countless species, each with their own fears, their own prejudices, their own assumptions about others. Building understanding across those divides would be a long, difficult process, but it was possible. She had proven that. Over the following months, Claire's new role took shape. She worked with Dr. Venrick and a team of researchers to develop comprehensive training protocols based on her techniques. They brought in advanced monitoring equipment to analyze the subtle signs in her body language, her sounds, her approach strategies. What they discovered was both simple and profound. Claire's success came from genuine respect for the animals she worked with. She did not see them as subjects to be controlled or problems to be solved. She saw them as individuals with their own perspectives, their own needs, their own emotional lives. It is not a technique that can be easily taught, Dr. Venrick admitted during one of their research sessions. The biological components, the body language, the vocal patterns, these can be learned. But the mindset, the genuine empathy, that is something deeper. Maybe that is okay, Claire suggested. Maybe not everyone is meant to work closely with predators, but those who do should approach it with respect and understanding. Students from across the galaxy began requesting transfers to the facility specifically to study under Claire. Some came with skepticism, determined to prove that her methods were either manipulation or luck. Others came with genuine curiosity, wanting to understand how to bridge the gap between species. One of her first students was a young Talorn named Kiptel. His people were herbivores, prey animals, with deeply built-in fear responses to predators. During their first session together, he could barely get within 10 meters of the Drakor juveniles without his fear scent triggering their hunting instincts. I do not think I can do this, he admitted after the fifth failed attempt. My biology will not let me. I am programmed to see them as threats. You are programmed to recognize danger, Claire corrected. That is not the same as being unable to overcome fear. Watch. And she demonstrated her approach, showing how she controlled her breathing. Moved carefully. Projected calm instead of anxiety. Fear is chemical, but so is courage. You can influence your own biology with practice and intention. Over weeks of patient work, Kiptel slowly improved. The breakthrough came when he managed to remain calm while a Drakor cub investigated him, sniffing curiously at his unusual scent. The cub, sensing no fear, simply lost interest and wandered away. Kiptel was shaking, but he was also smiling. You did, Claire confirmed. And you know what that means? It means this is not just a human ability. Anyone willing to put in the work, to face their fears and push past their instincts, can learn to connect with predators. The implications of that realization spread outward. If prey species could learn to work peacefully with predators, if the biological instincts that had separated species for millions of years could be overcome through understanding and effort, then what other barriers might fall? The Dracor cubs were eventually moved to the sanctuary on their homeworld, but Claire maintained regular contact with their caregivers. She received updates on their progress, photos and videos of them thriving in their natural environment. Scout, still the leader, had integrated successfully with an adult family group. Shadow, her smallest cub, had grown into a powerful adult himself. The Ridge Stalkers were returned to Corvin 4, where they were released into a protected wilderness area. Before their departure, Claire spent one final session with them, saying goodbye to each juvenile individually. The largest one, who had been the first to trust her, pressed his massive head against her chest in a gesture that needed no translation. "Thank you," she whispered to him. "For trusting me when you had no reason to. For showing the galaxy that connection is possible." Years passed. Claire completed her training and became a certified xenobiologist, then an instructor, then eventually the director of the facility's Predator Interaction Program. The work she had begun as a frightened student became a new way of thinking about xenobiology, taught at schools across the galaxy. But perhaps her greatest achievement was not in the research papers, or the training protocols, or the awards she received. It was in the small moments. A Quill student successfully calming an aggressive predator for the first time. A Vareth handler forming a bond with a species his people had feared for generations. A Talorn researcher laughing with delight as a predator cub played with her like she was just another member of its pack. Commander Hayes returned to the facility years later, now retired from active military service and working as a civilian liaison. He found Claire in her office, reviewing applications from prospective students. "I heard you turned down the position on the Council's Xenobiology Board," he said. "I did," Claire confirmed. "I am more useful here, teaching, than I would be in meetings and politics. You have changed the galaxy. The work you have done here, the bridges you have built, it opened doors for humanity that might have stayed closed for generations." Claire set down the applications and looked at him seriously. "It was not just me. It was never just me. It was Venric, believing in my approach, when it went against everything he had been taught. It was Krelva giving me the chance to prove myself. It was students from dozens of species, willing to face their fears and challenge their instincts. It was even Velkran, in a way, because his opposition forced us to clearly say what we stood for. Still," Hayes said, "you were the catalyst. You sat down with scared predator cubs and showed them kindness when everyone expected you to show dominance. That one choice spread outward and changed how species interact with each other." Claire walked to her window, which looked down on the training arenas below. She could see students from multiple species working with various animals, using the principles she had helped establish. Some would succeed, others would struggle. But all of them were trying to build understanding across seemingly impossible divides. "I think about those Dracor cubs sometimes," she said softly. "How terrified they were in that arena. How desperate for someone to just see them as more than threats. I think about how easily I could have dismissed them, stayed behind my barrier, treated them like problems to be contained. But you did not. No. Because I saw myself in them. I understood what it felt like to be judged before anyone got to know you. To be feared for what you might be instead of accepted for who you are." She turned back to Hayes. "That is what humanity brings to the galactic community, I think. Not strength or intelligence or technology. We bring the experience of being both predator and prey, of having to overcome our own dark instincts, of learning that the capacity for violence means nothing compared to the choice to be kind. And that choice," Hayes said, "makes all the difference." As the sun set on the training facility, casting long shadows across the arenas where countless beings learn to overcome fear and build understanding, Claire felt a deep sense of peace. The galaxy was still vast, still full of challenges and conflicts, and misunderstandings, but it was also full of possibility. Every student who learned to see past their instincts, every predator who learned to trust, every frightened being who found courage, they all proved the same basic truth that Claire had discovered in an arena surrounded by scared cubs all those years ago. Connection is possible. Understanding can bridge any divide. And sometimes, the greatest strength is knowing when to be gentle. The Drakor cubs, now fully grown and thriving on their homeworld, would never know the impact they had had. They had simply been babies who needed comfort, who found it in an unlikely source, and who responded with trust. But that trust had changed everything, and somewhere in the vast galaxy, other beings would face their fears, reach across seemingly impossible divides, and discover the same truth. The space between different species, between predator and prey, between fear and trust, is not as wide as it seems. It only takes one person willing to sit down, be patient, and show kindness to bridge that gap. That was the lesson Claire had taught, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.